Are you struggling to read a file from the Resources folder in your Spring Boot application? You're not alone. Many developers face this issue, and today we're going to solve it together. I totally get it. It can be really frustrating when your code seems right, but it just doesn't work. This is a common problem, especially when dealing with file paths in Java. Here's the situation we're diving into. A user is trying to read a file named jsonschema.json from the Resources folder in their Spring Boot project. They shared their code, but they're running into a file not found error. Sound familiar? Let's break it down. So what's going wrong here? The issue often lies in how resources are accessed in a Spring Boot application. When you package your application, the Resources folder is treated differently than regular files. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll not only fix this issue, but also learn best practices for handling resources in Spring Boot. To read a file from the Resources folder in Spring Boot, the user should first ensure that the file is correctly placed in the Resources directory. This is typically located under the main source folder. Next, the user should modify their code to use the input stream instead of trying to create a file object. This is a more reliable way to access resources in a Spring Boot application. After obtaining the input stream, the user can then read the JSON schema using the appropriate method from the JSON schema validator library. This will help avoid the file not found exception. Finally, the user should ensure that they handle any potential exceptions that may arise when reading the file. This will make the application more robust. Fun fact, did you know that the first version of Spring was released back in 2003? It's come a long way since then, making Java development much easier. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach shared by another user involves using the URL method to read the file. Instead of creating a file object, they suggest obtaining the resource URL directly and loading the JSON schema from that URL. Let's take a look at an answer from another user. An alternative approach to reading a file from the Resources folder in Spring Boot is to use Spring's streamutils. You can easily convert the file into a string with just one line of code. If you prefer to read the file as a byte array, you can use Java's file.io libraries. This method reads the file directly from the specified path. Now, let's dive into a different answer from another user. An alternative approach, suggested by another user, is to utilize Spring and Jackson for reading the file. They recommend a simple one-liner code that uses the Object Mapper class to read the JSON file directly from the class path. Let's take a look at another answer from another user. An alternative solution involves using resource utils and Java 11's files.readString method. This approach handles UTF-8 encoding and ensures resources are properly closed. For a simpler method, create your resource file under main resources data test.data, define its path in application.properties or YML, and then access it in your code using the @value annotation. That's all for that response. Let's see what someone else had to say. An alternative approach suggested by another user involves using Spring's resource loader to load files from the Resources folder. They recommend auto-wiring the resource loader and creating a method that retrieves the file using the class path. Here's a pro tip. Always check your resource paths when working with Spring Boot. A small mistake in the path can lead to frustrating errors. And there you have it. You should now be able to read files from the Resources folder without any issues. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more tips and tricks on Spring Boot and Java development.